How you doing? I'm Dr. Paul Dyer. Welcome to a little bit of format of Dr. Paul. This is not Bridges Live, normally the podcast I normally use when I'm interviewing some of my friends and family, or when I'm just talking to some incredible people that are doing some passionate things around the world, in the neighborhood, in the community, and making a difference. Because to me, Bridges Live is about information, understanding, and action. What I want to come to you about is something I've been thinking about doing, and I have done before, is to have a conversation with you. And the conversation is about either the ego, mind, or the conscious development, or who's speaking and who is talking. And so what I want to get into is that when I ask, or when we talk, how do you start a conversation? How do you emphasize the type of conversation you're going to have with a person? Because this is important. You know, when we look at kids and education, and there's a lot of information that's going on, or a lot of conversations we're having about children, it's because of this pandemic issue, getting back to school, having kids, how they relate to school, the expanding differences of the type of kids who are learning in virtual learning, who isn't learning, who is homeschooling, who isn't homeschooling. So there's a lot of conversations, disagreements, arguments around education. But what we want to understand is that when we talk, and I'm a neuroscience guy when it comes to the science of the body and the brain and emotions. When it comes to the prefrontal cortex, we know that's the part of the brain that's the most impacted of intention, right? The attention control, decision making. That's important. The reason why that's so important is because how that gets affected is also so how that gets traumatized. And often in our trauma and being traumatized, we don't understand what has happened and what has influenced our decision making. And this comes a lot with the questions. When we talk about the questions, when we talk about the reason for why we ask something on a biological level, on a molecular level, or just in a external level, we have to understand who is talking to who is doing the most. When I say who, it's sometimes it means the what. The what meaning, is it the ego mind? Is it the mind that only seek to gratify itself? When you have the ego person that lives within all of us, and that we must understand, not tame, not control, because if you understand it, you can silence it. You can. But if you try to tame it, it's only going to try to maneuver around you and find itself in other avenues so it could come out. Because if you don't understand something, you're only going to try to manipulate it, whether you want to or not. If you don't understand something, you're only going to try to manipulate it, whether you want to or not. So when we battle ourselves, ask ourselves, who is doing the talking? Who is doing the asking? And who is doing the listening? So you have the conscious mind, you have the ego mind, right? And you have the trauma mind. Just take those three. Are there others? I'm sure they are, but I think they're branches of it. So am I speaking through my trauma? Am I listening with my trauma? Am I speaking through my ego? Am I listening with my ego? Am I speaking with consciousness? Am I listening with consciousness? Ask yourself these questions because it comes out differently through the vibrational level of connection. Connection is communication. Connection is of the living. Consciousness is being present in the connection. Ego is trying to control the connection. Trauma is trying to disconnect you from the living source. So when you're speaking on those different terms, those different levels, those different speech, it will be, the results will be dramatically different. The brain chemicals that gets released in the three forms is completely different. Those chemicals, those neural pathways that are being developed because of speech, completely different. So it all has this organic development that comes to it. So I just want to, not going to talk about how to understand, but I want you to first ask yourself, who is speaking? Who is listening? Remember, is it my trauma? Is it my ego? Is it the consciousness? These things are important. You can always reach me, contact me, Dr. Paul Dyer. We are here as a living vessel on this plane, navigating, connecting, hopefully connecting, and that connection is communication. And in that communication, we are developing community. Without connection, we destroy community. And if we're destroying community, we destroy lives. And if we're destroying lives, we're destroying, but not living. Just want to spend a little time with you. Please, a little food for thought. I'm Dr. Paul, and you have a great evening.